of us defend our city.
Yeah, this is the fourth night of protests. Last night, watching some of the pictures and images coming out of downtown Los Angeles was mind-blowing. I mean, more than 500 people were arrested. Have you spoken to Chief Michael Moore at all about arrests that have been going on today? How many people have been arrested? Do we know?
That number is probably changing every minute because an unlawful assembly was declared some time ago in the Fairfax area. It's a slow, methodical thing, but people are getting arrested as we speak. And, I want to be very clear to folks, especially young people who might think this is a really cool and defining moment. It's not cool. It's not good to be destroying property, lighting fires, setting police cars on fire where there's bullets that can explode and kill people. Last night, our officers, with incredible restraint, got iron, bricks, concrete thrown at them, concussions. We saw gunfire that could have killed a protester or a police officer, and we have a suspect in custody. This is not violence. Meeting violence is never an answer. Never, never, never. And when we ask you to go home, you need to go home, or else we will arrest people, because what you're saying essentially is it's no longer about peaceful protest. This is about trying to enable, even if you're not one of the bad actors that are out there that are destroying our city, and we will not stand for that.
Yeah, and I want to talk again about the National Guard. Obviously, there's a lot of people who live in this district. There's a lot of businesses in this area as well. When can we expect them to arrive to our area to kind of help out our local law enforcement?
Well, we made the request a little bit ago in the last hour, and we're told it takes at least about 7 hours. So they could be here during the night this evening. And part of the reason when folks asked why did we go from, initially the chief just asked me to have the curfew for downtown, and why I asked him to go citywide and then sign the paperwork to do that. It makes it much easier. We could have closed down one area and people could have popped up in Hollywood or gone over the border into Santa Monica into a different part of the city. The only way we can know that if folks are on the streets after 8 p.m. And that they are not to be there is they are clearly out there because they want to cause trouble, and we won't have ever the resources to all at once take everybody into custody. But I hope that folks will find their better angels, and actually, if you're listening to this, go home. You're not to be out. And if you're out, we know you're staying out because you want to get into conflict or cause trouble. And there are consequences to that, and they won't just last for a single night. So please be smart. Please be a part of healing the city, and if you don't, we're going to be there.
Mayor, I want to ask you about something that has been on people's minds for months now. For months, you and other city and county officials have asked people to stay home to slow the spread of coronavirus. The pandemic, as we know, is ongoing still and has been in the past the leading cause of death in LA County on several occasions. You have been very clear that you don't want people to gather at all until, as of late, when you have expressed support for people demonstrating. How do you square that when you see all these people here standing so close together in the middle of a time when they're supposed to be staying apart? All right, we have a few technical issues with Mayor Garcetti, and we lost him. We'll try and ask him that question a little bit later. But we do have the mayor of Beverly Hills now, Lester Friedman, joining us on the phone. Lester, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. I just want to ask you for some context here. When was the last time you saw anything like this, or we've seen anything like this in the city of Beverly Hills?
No, well, this is certainly the first time I've seen anything like this in the city of Beverly Hills, and it's very unfortunate that we had very peaceful protesters during the day, and then all of a sudden it has now changed from being a protest to being a free-for-all for a bunch of people who really don't have any respect for the life of the deceased.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about, some of the scenes that we saw earlier today when a group of people made their way from the Fairfax district to Beverly Hills. We saw images from Rodeo Drive trying to break into a business. They got into one business. People ran in and started, taking items from inside that business. What was your conversation like with police as far as how you're going to go about and, make sure that the people of Beverly Hills and your city stay safe?
Well, we were prepared for the fact that there were going to be people who were going to be migrating from the demonstration that was occurring at Pan Pacific Park. So we did have our resources in place. Our police department is well trained. They were ready for this. There were between 2,000 and 4,000 people that came in waves during the day. And again, during the day, it was a peaceful protest. There were a couple broken windows, some spray paint, but for the most part, people were protesting. And then all of a sudden in the late afternoon, it looks as if people who want to take advantage of the situation are the ones who are causing the trouble.
You know, I want to ask you about an alert that was sent out much earlier in the afternoon before things got as crazy as they've gotten in these evening hours now. You were asking residents to stay inside. Of course, there's a curfew now, and you were asking motorists to stay off the roads. Can you tell people who live in Beverly Hills, you know, what officers and city officials are doing to make sure that people who are just living their lives there are protected and safe throughout all of this?
Well, we have an excellent police department, and our police department is being supplemented by the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, and we are also the benefactors of mutual aid from other accompanying cities so that we can keep our residents and our visitors safe.
Yeah, you know, just seeing these images are, you know, pretty intense. As far as the curfew goes, the curfew is also for Beverly Hills. What have police been ordered to do in the event that people are out past 8 o'clock? It's 8:13 on a Saturday night. The curfew's in effect. What are police doing now?
People are being escorted out of the city. They are being pushed out by the police lines that are having people go back to where they came from. If they refuse to leave, they are subject to arrest, and the arrest will occur if necessary.
All right, Mayor Lester Friedman of the city of Beverly Hills, thank you so much for joining us on the phone. We appreciate it. We hope everyone there stays safe.
Yeah, and you know, these images that we're seeing here in Los Angeles, just one of many cities all across the country. These have been going on for days. New York, Phoenix, Atlanta, Portland, even up in Northern California, Sacramento, Oakland. A lot of people outraged because of the death of George Floyd. We know one of the police officers was arrested and charged with murder, but people are still angry. They're angry over police brutality that's been going on for a very long time, which is where these protests came from. You know, they're in pain, they're grieving, they're speaking up. This is their First Amendment rights. But once things start getting violent and vandalism and graffiti starts to happen, that's when things take a change. I mean, you look at all these patrol officers. Earlier in the day, I believe there was probably a dozen police cars that were, you know, bashed and lit on fire. You saw people breaking into businesses and stealing items from inside as well. There's also civilian cars that were vandalized as well. And we've been seeing these images from all three different reporters that we have on the field. We have 3 different crews out there, but it's heartbreaking to see. And another thing too is what Sarah mentioned is we are in the middle of a pandemic, and sometimes it's hard to realize that we are when you're looking at these images, not only here but all across the country. And you know, that could probably cause some uneasiness for people as well. They've been home for the past 2.5 months. This was a weekend that LA County you were allowed to go out. You were allowed to shop. You were allowed to go to a restaurant and go out to eat if you wanted to. You can get your hair cut. And then we see images like this, which is the opposite of what we thought this weekend could have been. Yeah,
and we just want to add that the city of Pasadena has joined the city of LA in instituting a curfew there at 8 o'clock. Mayor Garcetti back on the phone with us now. Mayor, I want to we're going to get him in just a moment. I was told by the control room that he's getting on the phone with us, so I want to give him a second to do that.
But it's interesting with the National Guard.
Right. I just want to reiterate that piece of news here. Mayor Garcetti telling CBS 2 Cal 9 that Governor Gavin Newsom has agreed to send 500 members of the National Guard to Los Angeles to help out with protest response. He said they could be here overnight. Typically takes about 7 hours for them to get here. So that is one piece of news out now as a result of our conversation with the mayor here on KCAL 9 News at 8 o'clock. But these are both live pictures now that you're seeing. It looks like some either tear gas or something being deployed here. Mayor Garcetti joining us now on the phone again. Mayor, I want to ask you what I was attempting to ask you earlier before we lost our connection. You've been telling people to stay home. You've been telling people to stay out of large groups. But you've also expressed support for demonstrations and free speech. How do you square that when we're in the middle of a pandemic? And in this situation, we have so many people, even peaceful protesters, standing so close together.
Well, I would say, look, if you're in pain, I feel your pain. If you're angry, I get it. But if you stay out tonight, this is a mistake that you will make that's not just about May 30th. It will live with you for a long time and with our city for a long time. As I've been saying for 2 months, our actions can kill people. And that's what happens in these situations. Innocent people can fire, can get killed. We saw somebody last night who fired at police officers through a crowd of protesters, and thank God no protester nor police officer was killed, but they could have been. Our city can be set back not just a few months or a couple years, but as we saw before, decades in terms of our job growth. We need each other right now more than anything else. And so you have to balance those two things, but balancing doesn't mean we're not going to be tough, because toughness is a way of showing the love for the city, that if we let people break the windows of small businesses and take everything they have, they'll never come back. And you should care about that business, but even if you don't, you should care about the people who work in that business. You should care about both of them. And so the actions of a moment of passion and pain are not going to just hurt others, they're going to hurt you for the rest of your life. So let's be smart, and we will continue to be strong.
All right, Mayor Eric Garcetti joining us on the phone. Hang tight, Mayor. I just want to call your attention to the images on the screen. It looks like some looting happening. This looks like it's Flight Club. Flight Club is a high-end sneaker store. The company tweeted out that they've been closed due to COVID-19 until at least mid-June, but major looting appearing to be underway there now. But Mayor Garcetti, again, joining us on the phone. Obviously, a lot happening tonight.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things I want to talk a little bit about is, the images that we're seeing out of Los Angeles from the past few days. As we've mentioned, this is a nationwide issue. This is something that is happening in a lot of major cities, even smaller cities as well. What I'm curious is what's the nationwide discussion like? Obviously, there needs to be a discussion nationwide, also from a local level as well. But are you meeting with other city leaders, whether through Zoom or through phone calls, to figure out how you're going to deal with this together? Because this is an issue that obviously is not going anywhere anytime soon.
Absolutely. We've been in contact, not just today, but from the beginning of this, I've been in contact with mayors of both Minneapolis and St. Paul, who are both good friends. Earlier today, I was in contact with about 12 mayors from our major cities across America as we compared notes. We see that there are some who are trying to exploit the situation and change the conversation from nonviolence and justice to just wanton chaos. And we can't let that happen, not just us as leaders, but all of us collectively. People who are out there who are destroying things have families and friends who need to call them out. And if they can't, we will be there to protect one another. That's what a civil society is about. LA's been through this too many times. We're more resilient than other cities that are experiencing this for the first time, but would also have to lead to real change. Here in Los Angeles, we have a fundamentally different police force than we had 30 years ago. Does that mean we're perfect? Of course not. But we can be an example of how do you de-escalate, deal with bias? How do you start hiring from the communities where you police? How do you change the dynamic so you don't just invest in police departments, but you expand the human services and raise the minimum wage and deal with people the way they're crippled before they even start? We have to address those things, but the wrong way to address those things is by violence. Violence never is an answer to violence, and I will keep saying that tonight. I'll keep saying that with my fellow mayors, and we all share that America is made up of our communities and our good judgment and the enforcement of a civil society. And I know some people don't like pieces of that, but all three are critical. Without peace, we can have no progress, and without justice, we cannot have that peace. Those have to all move together. And tonight, we will be out there. We'll continue to be out there, and I encourage anybody to not make a mistake that isn't just going to last with you tonight, but for many, many years to come.
Mayor, we got a viewer question that I'm curious about as well, and it has to do with the state of California mandating that zero bail policy for low-level misdemeanor cases to slow the spread of coronavirus in our local jails and prisons across our state, which have seen outbreaks of the virus in certain cases. How does that apply tonight? We're seeing mass arrests yesterday. We saw 533 arrests associated with the protests downtown. No telling how many arrests tonight as a result of these demonstrations and some of the violence that has happened at them. What is going to happen? Are these people going to just be immediately released out onto the street, assuming they committed a lower level misdemeanor?
No, not necessarily. It depends. It's all proportionate, but people should not think that everybody just gets out. That is not the case. Some of the bails have been set at $50,000 and more. They're serious crimes. There are life-threatening crimes. There's people who will have probably attempted murder, like we saw last night, or attempted manslaughter at the very least, but I think murder, when somebody's firing a weapon at people, a gun. You're seeing people who are lighting fires that could destroy and kill people in buildings. These are serious crimes, and people won't, just be let right out. For folks who refuse to move, we got to understand the seriousness of this moment. For a police officer, they may not be able to distinguish between somebody who says, I'm not leaving no matter what, and somebody who is right there lighting a car on fire. And so the best thing you can do for yourself is to go home. And if you don't, there will be officers out there to protect our city, National Guard probably within about 4 or 5 hours, and we will make sure that we hold the city down and we move to a day which people can still talk about the pain they feel, the anger that they have, but not this way. This is fundamentally wrong.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about earlier your press conference. You talked about testing sites, and the city and county had to close testing for coronavirus due to public safety. Any idea if that's going to be closed tomorrow as well for people who maybe have scheduled appointments?
Well, we do take Sundays off, so that's the day to kind of restock and recover. But anybody who had an appointment in the last few hours of today will be moved to Monday. And we need peace, though, to be in the city to be able to do that. We shouldn't let, violence or people's destructive behaviors keep people away from coronavirus tests that can save their lives, get them back to work, help them achieve some justice in a moment that's very difficult. So we plan to continue to move forward, but Sundays are off days, luckily, for tomorrow.
Good to know. And also, a lot of businesses were vandalized and damaged. Will the city be helping these businesses in buildings that have had damage or, fires inside them?
Of course. We've got to. These are businesses that have been already hard hit by the last 2 months, some of the hardest days, if not the hardest days of their existence. And absolutely, we will be there. We will use whatever funds we have. But this is our collective responsibility, too. The destruction that goes on, the tougher and tougher it will be. We can't set our city back, and communities that are already struggling back. If a small business gets destroyed, it probably gets taken over by a corporation. If workers can't get back to work, they can become homeless. Think about the consequences of what you're doing, and for those very few who won't think and continue to do it, we're going to make sure that you meet the law.
Mayor, I know you've spoken out repeatedly about the various social justice issues at hand here and the level of inequity that many have brought up in the wake of the death of George Floyd. But I want to ask you a question. Some of your critics have said that you're not supportive enough of police officers. What do you say to an officer who might be frustrated and feel like they're not getting the support they need as they're dealing with all of this violence and in many cases getting hurt?
I can't say it more clearly, and of course you always have some critics who say something. I love our police officers. I love who they are. I love their courage. I've been with their families when they've been killed. Last year, Juan Diaz was an officer who, when he was off duty, was trying to get a tagger not to, besmirch the neighborhood that he grew up in and still lived in, and he was shot and killed as a result of it. I've seen them save people's horrible lives from domestic violence, mentor young children, walk the walk, talk the talk. Can we find bad apples? Can we find people who don't do the right things? Of course, and nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop. But the men and women of this department have my 100% support to do what we need to do in this city to make sure that we can protect people. And I was so proud not just of the restraint they showed last night, but also of the way that they say their duty was to protect people's rights. But let's be clear, other people can take away our rights. When somebody destroys a cop car or somebody breaks a window or steals things from a small business here in Los Angeles, they're destroying the rights of all of us and the rights of those protesters to have peaceful protests. And I think that all of us, including those who are peaceful protesters, should be outraged at that sort of behavior and should be unified in supporting the human beings that wear our badges and are tonight doing the very frightening work of restoring order in our city.
All right, Mayor Eric Garcetti with Los Angeles, thank you so much for talking to us. We'll be in contact with you as we move forward with this. We want to go to Greg Mills. He's actually live in downtown Los Angeles where there was a large protest last night. Tonight it looks like there's some more activity going on. Greg, what's going on in downtown?
As you can see, a caravan of police cars are going flying by, highway patrol involved, mostly highway patrol. So I'm thinking they're heading to the 110 freeway right now, which is just up the street in the direction they are heading. We are at 3rd Street and Hill, and there's at least, I'd say 20, 25 cars that have gone by us in the last, well, since you started the intro, what's that, about 15 seconds ago. But also police are here right now, and as soon as they all go past, we'll go over to a fire here in the middle of the intersection, 3rd Street and Hill. Witnesses said the fire's been going on for about an hour. About 200 people here. They started the fire, just grabbed anything they could. It smells horrible because cones and other things that are rubber are in it. Now here comes more, I'm guessing CHP again heading in the direction, and we are just, what, a couple blocks away from the 110 freeway in downtown Los Angeles. But a whole bunch of cars, as you can see, a whole lineup, still highway patrol heading to the freeway. And in a second, we are going to ask to go to some video that we shot about 20 minutes ago, and you will see people looting, tons of people looting, but you're watching this right now. Just let me know when we're going to that video, and I'll tell you all about that. We're at 3rd Street and Hill. What you're going to see in a few minutes, a few seconds, was at 4th and Hill just a few minutes ago. But let these police cars go by, highway patrol, toward the 110 freeway, and then we'll show you some looting. It was a Walgreens at 4th and Hill. I saw the guy break the window. All he got was some potato chips, but then we were still there a few minutes later and saw a whole bunch of people going into the Walgreens and stealing all kinds of stuff. 20, 30 people went into the Walgreens at 4th and Hill and just wiped out the store, and then we saw them running away with all the merchandise there too. We had to leave because it became a little bit too dangerous there, and we went up the street 1 block to 5th and Hill, stayed there, and then people were coming at our van, and some bonehead threw a metal bar at our van. Luckily, he had no arm. The coward didn't strike his target, which is us, so we took off after that. But a really dangerous situation. We were at 4th and Hill, and nobody was there at the time. No police were there at the time. It was just us and a bunch of looters and people very, very angry. No protesting at that time. We were in Orange County earlier, and there were protests. But this is what the scene is right now at 3rd Street and Hill. Again, a fire that's about to go out. Police are over here on the other side of the street. There's about 10 police cars right there. I think we're going to go investigate what CHP was doing heading up to the 110 in just a moment. But again, this is at 3rd and Hill. Looting we showed you at 4th and Hill, and there were a couple hundred people there, and many, many were going into the Walgreens there. They tried to break into another store across the street from the Walgreens at 4th and Hill. So that's the deal here in downtown. A lot of people still out riding bikes, walking, well past the 8 p.m. curfew. Back to you two.
Greg, this is so hard to watch because if you were watching KCAL 9 News last night or CBS News at 11, we saw a lot of images similar to this going into the night, into the early morning hours. We know LAPD arrested 533 people, and you know, a lot of the focus today was in the Fairfax district, in Beverly Hills, in the West Hollywood area. But at the same time, Los Angeles is a huge city, downtown Los Angeles. They were the first to actually have a curfew. It's 8:30 at night and still a lot of activity going on. How did this get intense within the last hour or so, or has it been like this since you've been out there this evening?
Chris, are you talking to me?
Yeah, that was to you, Greg. But we also want to go to...
I just want to, Greg, hold on for just one moment, because I want to draw your attention right now to the images that you see on the right-hand side of your screen. This is the Fairfax district now.
That's off of Melrose. That's Lala's, I believe.
Multiple fires burning now on Melrose. It looks like a trash fire, a couple of trash fires in the middle of the street, including the dumpsters that were pushed into the middle of the street, and then a palm tree on the right-hand side of the street, and still dozens of people out in this area. Certainly, I do want to say a smaller crowd than we saw earlier in the daylight hours, but there is this curfew in effect. LAPD says they are going to arrest people if they are in defiance of that curfew, and we're waiting to see now if there are any officers over here, and this might be right there next to that store, right? Melrose and Fairfax, right by Fairfax High School. The officers we saw here earlier may have moved on, and we're going to see if they come back. I got a question from a friend asking about why are the officers standing when, in a row when only a couple of blocks or even a block behind them there's looting, and you can imagine some of the logistical challenges as well as the communication challenges. They're having to talk to each other, talk to other agencies to keep each other apprised of what's happening where, and when there's this much chaos going on, sometimes it's hard to keep track of it, as you can imagine, but it looks like there may still be looting here. It looks like either LASD or LAPD airship is flying over the head, so you can imagine they're making calls to officers on the ground to let them know what's going on, as well as to firefighters who have to make their way here eventually to get some of these fires out if they don't go out on their own.
Yeah, and it's one of those situations when you look at fires like this, just that palm tree, any little bit of wind, those embers will fly, and that's how fires are caused. And, hopefully LAFD gets to this area pretty quickly. But as you could just see, Fairfax District, Beverly Hills, and now downtown Los Angeles, 3 cities, 3 areas where there's violence. There's violence and there's protests that are going on right now. And at the top of this hour, we also talked about how the city of Pasadena also issued a curfew as well, because they want to make sure that people stay out of that area. But I mean, just looking at these images, Sarah, just heartbreaking and frankly scary, because you never know what could lead into. And my biggest thing all day was, okay, this protest starts around noon. The time goes on. As the day went on, it progressively got worse and worse. The chaos ensued. And I wanted to know what it would be like, once the sun went down. And here's an idea of that. There's a curfew, but still.
I want to check and see here. It looks like this is on the left-hand side of your screen. I want to say that's actually Fairfax. It says Beverly Hills, but it's actually Fairfax. We're being told a couple different things here by our control room, but I'm pretty sure it's the Fairfax district off of the 7,000 block of Melrose. There at that corner store. Not sure if people were trying to break in or were breaking there earlier, but it looks like some of our producers may have seen them looting there earlier, as well as an eyeglass shop. It's on the corner there of Melrose, not far from Fairfax, I believe. Yeah, not far from where we were seeing that scene earlier. So we're looking at a couple of different situations. It's Melrose between Laurel, I think, and maybe Fairfax there. So that was happening there on the corner. And on the right-hand side of your screen, we're seeing LAFD arriving, and they are probably going to be flanked by LAPD or some kind of law enforcement agency. They typically don't go into situations of unrest unless they're accompanied by law enforcement. Because remember, firefighters, they're there for medical calls, they're there for fires, they're there for those kinds of emergencies. They don't enforce the law. They rely on police officers to do that so that they can do their jobs. And right now, we have a bit of a situation here because we have a group of people in the street that are blocking their way. In fact, it looks like maybe even somebody purposely sitting or standing right in front of the ladder truck right there, preventing them from getting through to the fire. They're actually blocking the fire department, and I don't see any police yet. Spare the LAPD helicopter that's overhead. They have to get through all of this too. And, we heard yesterday of people trying to interfere with fire department at various protests yesterday. This is not a good situation. This is, a terrible situation for the people who live in this area. Chris, you talked about it earlier. The Fairfax district, there are so many there are apartments and houses. It's very densely populated, businesses.
Well, on this street in particular, on Melrose, there's a lot of small business shops. And we've been reporting, during this pandemic, and I've spoken to a lot of those owners who have been closed for 2.5 months. So they were excited for this weekend. They're like, hey, people can come in, they can shop, we'll keep our distancing and what have you. And then you have a Saturday night, first weekend you can actually do this, and then this happens. This is not helping the local community leaders, small business owners as well. But what's also interesting is that, Mayor Garcetti had a press conference at 5 o'clock. 3 hours later, we find out that the National Guard is being deployed to Los Angeles. So it shows just what a matter of hours can do, but it also makes you wonder, what kind of plans are being taken for the future, which is why the National Guard is on its way.
Look at this. Somebody is actually throwing stuff at the fire department now. That's what we saw on the right-hand side of the screen there. And, they are also just trying to do their jobs here. They are, Chris and I, we've covered, I don't even know how many fires we've covered now, and that ember cast is a real problem.
Yeah, especially here.
Yeah, when you have a tree on fire, you have dry, hot conditions, fires can spread very, very quickly, and they can become devastating. We covered that explosion and subsequent fire in downtown LA feels like it was years ago now, but it was just a couple of weeks ago, and that was devastating for the fire department. They already face enough challenges trying to do their job safely. This is not what we want to see, and people are now interfering with that, and we're hoping that they're able to do that safely. So I'm not sure if they're going to get out of there or if they're going to try and put these fires out now. I think they're small enough that they could make quick work of that and get them out quickly. But if they're not able to do their job safely, they just can't do that. And this is the Adidas store now in the Fairfax district. And there's looting happening there too.
And what's interesting is, during this pandemic, when you weren't allowed to shop at retail, a lot of these stores, they removed their items from inside because
some of them did.
Some of them did, yeah, and a lot, especially in this area off of Melrose. But with people allowed to do in-store retail shopping, items are now back in, and as you could see, just like that.
In certain situations, larger companies, Adidas,
curbside.
I don't know if
They did the
Adidas is
curbside.
included in this, you were able to order online and pick up in the store. So they still had some sort of semblance of operations going. This is the Adidas store on Melrose, I believe, right, Chris? I think this is,
yeah.
Melrose and Edinburgh, between Edinburgh and Laurel.
It's so hard to just wrap my head around these images that we've been seeing for the last few hours.
Yeah, and I want to be quite clear, these aren't protests. Obviously, this is looting. This is something very different. These people aren't demonstrating. They're committing a crime. And the police, as well as the mayor and various other people, have been very clear about that there is a major distinction between that and that this is criminal. These are not demonstrations that we're seeing here. And even though there are protests happening at the same time, we're trying to do our best to make that clear as to what's happening where, because many things are happening at once. This is a very chaotic situation in that sense. And in this situation, this is the 8,000 block of Melrose, the Adidas store being looted now. We don't see officers responding here yet, but they are overwhelmed, and they are relying on the help of other agencies, including the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department and other cities' police departments, to help them out here. You can imagine what the scanners sound like tonight.
Oh, I can only imagine. This is like the scene out of a bad movie, or a scary movie rather. And you can imagine these people who are out there driving, they're probably freaking out, having no idea what's going on. And frankly, we don't really know what's going on either. All we know is that law enforcement is out there. They're trying to get people to go home. A curfew was installed 40 minutes ago, but as you can see, that's not stopping people. But one thing I will say, Sarah, is if you look at the crowds around noon, there were thousands of people.
This is nowhere near.
And if you look at it now, it seems like the crowds are getting smaller and smaller, which is what we want to see. And hopefully people are listening because, as Chief Moore with LAPD said, if you're out there, people will be arrested. Let's see what's going on here. It looks like
people are coming out. It looks like maybe
another
coming
store.
out
Is
of
that the same store?
I'm not sure if that's still the Adidas. Yeah, I think it is. I think it's still the Adidas store. And they're running out. Some of them have boxes in their hands. And some of them are running out empty-handed now. And remember, these are places of work for people. And so many people have been out of work and are now just returning now that stores are able to function somewhat normally again. I understand this is a larger company. That does not mean that this is not going to impact people's livelihoods who live and work here in Los Angeles. This is just really, really hard for us to see as a city right now. And I just want to catch our viewers up. You're watching extended coverage, KCAL 9 News at 8 o'clock. We're doing special coverage of some breaking news of unrest in the city of Los Angeles and beyond, and previous protests and demonstrations, now some looting and a certain criminal element here happening. This is all happening in the Fairfax district. There have been incidents in Beverly Hills and downtown Los Angeles to boot. So a lot of is happening here. The city of Los Angeles has mobilized its entire police department, something that hasn't happened since the mid-'90s during the earthquakes. Jeff Nguyen is on the ground right now, and it looks like there are arrests happening there. Jeff, where are you exactly?
So basically, I am right in front of Cantor's Deli on Fairfax, and you can see there are literally just dozens of people with zip ties lined up in front of that store right there on Colfax. I think that's one of the businesses that you and Pat had mentioned. On the ground, we can see some charred debris. That is perhaps what was burning about an hour ago when I showed that to both you and Pat. And you can see some of these young men with zip ties being placed into the back of that van right there. Just to let you know, we are kind of keeping our distance way back so that A, the police officers can do their job. Secondly,